The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. That's what Sarah remembers most. The constant drumming on the roof of the cabin, the way the drops slid down the windows like something trying to get in. She was alone in the North Cascades, renting a place deep in the woods for what was supposed to be a peaceful writing retreat. The cabin sat at the end of a logging road that barely existed anymore, swallowed by moss and ferns. The nearest neighbor was 12 miles away. On the third night, the rain stopped completely, and that's when she heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling the cabin. She turned off all the lights and pressed herself against the wall, listening. The steps moved from the porch to the side of the house, crunching over wet leaves and gravel. Then they stopped, right outside her bedroom window. She could hear breathing, low and ragged, like whoever was out there had been running for miles. Sarah didn't move, didn't breathe, and then, through the darkness, she heard a voice, her own voice, calling her name from outside, asking to be let in. Few people understand the Pacific Northwest the way locals do. The endless forests, the mountains that vanish into mist, the coastlines where the ocean feels ancient and hungry. It's beautiful, yes, but there's something else beneath that beauty. Something that watches from the tree line. Something that's been here long before us. And tonight, I'm sharing 7 true stories from people who came face to face with that darkness. Stories that law enforcement couldn't explain. Stories that left marks that never healed. Before we step deeper into these woods, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Here at Chills from Reality, every story leaves a mark. One you might not forget. Because what you're about to hear isn't fiction. These are real accounts. Real people. Real fear. Sarah stayed frozen against that wall for what felt like hours. Her voice kept calling from outside, pleading, crying, saying things only she would know. Details from her childhood, names of people long dead. The voice begged her to open the door. Said it was cold out there, said it needed help. But Sarah knew. She knew she was inside. So what was outside, wearing her voice like a mask? When dawn finally came, she packed everything in 10 minutes and drove straight out. She never looked in the rearview mirror, never went back for the deposit. 2 weeks later, the property owner called her, said they found scratches around every window of the cabin, deep gouges in the wood, like something had been trying to claw its way inside. And on the front door, written in mud, were 2 words, "Let me." The second story comes from the Olympic Peninsula, a place where the rainforest grows so thick that sunlight barely touches the ground, where the trees are older than nations and the silence feels alive. Marcus was a wildlife photographer, spending weeks at a time in the backcountry, capturing images of elk and black bears. He knew the woods, respected them. In October of 2021, he hiked into a remote area near the Hoh River, setting up camp near an old-growth grove. The first 2 nights were normal. Cold, quiet, the sound of the river a constant companion. On the 3rd night, he woke to something moving through his camp. Heavy footfalls, slow, methodical. He grabbed his flashlight and unzipped the tent just enough to look out. What he saw made his blood stop. A figure, tall, maybe 7 feet, standing at the edge of the firelight. It wasn't moving, just standing there, watching his tent. Marcus couldn't make out details. The shape was wrong. Too thin in places, too thick in others, like a person stretched and broken and put back together incorrectly. He didn't breathe, didn't move. The thing stood there for minutes that felt like hours. And then it spoke. Not words, not exactly, but sounds that felt like words. A low vibration that made his teeth ache. It sounded like it was trying to mimic human speech, but had never heard it before. trying to form syllables with a mouth that wasn't built for it. Marcus stayed in that tent until sunrise. When he finally came out, the fire was scattered. His food bag, hung 12 feet up a tree, was on the ground, ripped open, but nothing was eaten, just torn apart and left. And in the dirt around his tent, he found tracks, bare feet, human-shaped, but the toes were too long, the stride too wide. He packed up and hiked 18 miles back to his car without stopping. When he reported it to the ranger station, they listened politely, took notes, but Marcus saw the look they exchanged, that look that said they'd heard this before. He asked if anyone else had reported something similar. The ranger paused, then said, "We get about 3 or 4 reports a year from that area. We tell people it's bears, but bears don't do what you described." Marcus never went back to that part of the forest. He still photographs wildlife, but now he stays closer to roads, closer to people, because he knows what he saw, and he knows it's still out there. Have you ever been alone in the woods and felt like something was watching you? That instinct that makes the hair on your neck stand up? Most of the time, we tell ourselves it's nothing, just nerves, just the wind. But what if it's not? The third story takes place on the Oregon coast, near a town called Yakats. It's a beautiful stretch of shoreline, cliffs and tide pools and beaches that seem to go on forever. But locals know that beauty comes with a warning. Don't go to the beach alone after dark. Don't follow voices you hear in the fog. And never, ever go near the old lighthouse ruins north of town. Emma learned why the hard way. She was visiting from California, staying at a small rental cottage overlooking the ocean. One evening in late November, she decided to walk along the beach at sunset. The fog was rolling in, thick and gray, swallowing the horizon. She walked for maybe 20 minutes, listening to the waves crash and the gulls cry overhead. And then the fog closed in completely. She couldn't see more than a few feet in any direction. The sound of the ocean became muffled, distant, like she'd stepped into another world. She turned to head back, but realized she'd lost her sense of direction. The beach looked the same in every direction, just sand and mist and the faint outline of cliffs. That's when she heard the singing. A woman's voice, soft, melodic, coming from somewhere ahead in the fog. Emma called out, asking if someone was there. The singing stopped, then started again, closer this time. She started walking toward it, thinking maybe someone could help her find her way back. The voice led her toward the water, closer and closer to the surf. And then Emma realized something. The voice wasn't singing words. It was just sounds. Notes that felt almost human, but not quite. She stopped. The singing stopped. And in the silence, she heard something else. Breathing all around her. Multiple sources, like she was surrounded. Emma ran. She didn't know which direction. She just ran, stumbling over rocks and driftwood, the fog so thick she couldn't see her own hands in front of her face. She fell twice, scraped her palms raw, but she kept running until she hit the wooden stairs that led up to the road. She climbed them and didn't stop until she was back at her cottage. Every light turned on, doors locked. The next morning, she talked to the woman who owned the property, described what happened. The woman went pale, told Emma that others had heard the singing too, that there were stories going back decades, fishermen who vanished, hikers who were found miles down the beach with no memory of how they got there. Some said it was spirits, echoes of people who drowned. Others said it was something older, something that lived in the fog and fed on confusion, on fear. Emma left 2 days early. She never went back to that town, and she never walks on beaches at night anymore. Would you have followed that voice? Would you have trusted it? Tell me in the comments. 'Cause sometimes the most dangerous thing in the dark isn't what we see, it's what we hear. Before we continue, if these stories are getting under your skin, hit that like button. It helps us bring you more real encounters, more true horror. Because here at Chills from Reality, the fear doesn't end when the story does. The fourth story comes from the mountains near Mount Rainier, a place where glaciers carve through stone and the wilderness stretches for hundreds of miles without a single road. In the summer of 2019, a group of 4 friends went backpacking in the Tatoosh Range. They were experienced hikers. They knew the trails. They followed all the rules. But on their second night, something went wrong. They'd set up camp near a small alpine lake surrounded by jagged peaks and patches of old snow. As the sun set, they sat around the fire, talking and laughing, enjoying the isolation. Around midnight, they heard it. A scream. Not human, not animal, something in between. It echoed off the mountains, impossibly loud, and then cut off abruptly. They sat in silence, listening. One of them, a guy named David, suggested it was a mountain lion, but none of them really believed that. The sound was wrong, too deliberate, too controlled. An hour later, they heard footsteps, something walking around the perimeter of their camp just outside the range of their firelight. Slow, crunching steps on gravel and pine needles. They called out, asked if someone was there. No response, just the footsteps moving in a wide circle, around and around. David grabbed a flashlight and pointed it toward the sound. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating trees and rocks and nothing else. But the footsteps didn't stop. They kept circling, closer each time. The group huddled near the fire, backs to each other, watching the darkness. And then one of them, a woman named Rachel, pointed at something just beyond the trees, a shape, tall and thin and wrong. It stood motionless, partially hidden behind a boulder. David shone the light directly at it. It didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there. And then, slowly, it tilted its head, too far, at an angle that shouldn't have been possible. That's when they ran. Left everything except their packs and headlamps and ran down the trail in the middle of the night. They didn't stop until they reached the trailhead at dawn. When they reported it to the ranger station, they were told that sometimes hikers experience altitude sickness, that the mind plays tricks in the wilderness. But all 4 of them saw the same thing, heard the same thing. And none of them have gone back to those mountains since. There's a reason the indigenous peoples of this region have stories about the forests, warnings passed down for generations, about things that walk on 2 legs but aren't human, about voices that mimic loved ones, about places where the boundary between worlds grows thin. We forget those warnings. We think we've tamed the wilderness with our GPS and satellite phones, but the wilderness doesn't care about our technology. It remembers what we've forgotten. The 5th story is shorter, but no less disturbing. It comes from a small logging town in Washington near the Canadian border. A man named Travis worked the night shift at a lumber mill. His shift ended at 2 a.m, and he'd drive home along a winding forest road, the same route every night for 5 years. One night in March, his headlights caught something in the road. He slowed down, thinking it was a deer. But as he got closer, he realized it was a person. A woman standing in the middle of the road, facing away from him. She was wearing a white dress, soaked through, her hair hanging wet and lank down her back. Travis stopped the truck, rolled down the window, asked if she needed help. She didn't move, didn't turn around. He called out again, louder this time. And then, slowly, she started to turn, but she didn't turn her body, just her head. It rotated degree by degree until she was facing him. but her body was still facing away. Her face was pale, eyes too wide, mouth stretched in something that wasn't quite a smile. Travis hit the gas. He swerved around her and didn't look back. When he got home, he told his wife what happened. She went silent, then told him her grandmother used to tell stories about that road, about a woman who drowned in the river nearby in the 1940s, about how she appears sometimes, trying to hitch a ride, trying to get home. But anyone who stops for her never makes it back. Travis started taking a different route home after that. It added 20 minutes to his drive. But he didn't care, because he knew what he saw. And he knew that if he'd gotten out of that truck, he wouldn't be here to tell this story. The sixth story involves the Columbia River Gorge, a place where the river cuts through the Cascade Mountains, creating cliffs and waterfalls and deep, shadowed ravines. It's a popular hiking area. Thousands of people visit every year. But there are trails that see fewer visitors, trails that wind deep into the gorge where the forest grows dense and the air feels heavy. A woman named Claire was hiking one of these trails alone in the fall of 2020. She was about 4 miles in when she noticed something odd. The birds had stopped singing. The entire forest had gone silent. No wind, no rustling leaves, nothing. She stopped walking, listening, and then she heard it. Footsteps behind her. She turned, expecting to see another hiker, but the trail was empty. She waited. The footsteps stopped. She started walking again. The footsteps resumed, matching her pace exactly. She walked faster. They walked faster. She broke into a jog. They did too. Claire looked back again, and this time she saw it. A shadow. Not a person, not an animal. Just a shadow, moving between the trees, keeping pace with her. But there was no sun. The sky was overcast. There should have been no shadows. She ran, full sprint, her lungs burning, her legs aching. The shadow followed, gliding through the forest without effort, always just at the edge of her vision. She ran for what felt like miles, until she finally burst out onto a more populated trail. A group of hikers stared at her, asking if she was okay. She looked back. The shadow was gone, but she could still feel it, watching from the trees, waiting. Claire drove straight home. She hasn't hiked alone since, and she refuses to go back to that trail because she knows it's still there, waiting in the silence for someone else. Do you think shadows can think, can hunt? Leave your answer below, because the line between the natural and the unnatural is thinner than we like to believe. The final story comes from the deep woods of northern Idaho near the Selkirk Mountains. This area is remote, isolated, miles from the nearest town with dirt roads that wash out every winter. A group of hunters set up camp here in late October, planning to spend a week tracking elk. There were 5 of them, all experienced outdoorsmen. On their 3rd night, they heard something moving through the forest. Big, heavy, snapping branches as it moved. They figured it was a bear and made noise to scare it off. But whatever it was, didn't leave. It circled their camp over and over for hours. One of the hunters, a man named Rick, set up a trail camera near the tree line, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever it was. The next morning, they checked the camera. What they found made no sense. The camera had taken hundreds of photos throughout the night. Most were empty forest, but in a few frames, there was something, a shape. It stood upright, like a man, but it was covered in hair, dark and matted. Its eyes reflected the camera flash, glowing pale and cold. But what disturbed them most was the expression. It wasn't blank. It wasn't animal. It looked curious, like it was studying the camera, trying to understand it. They packed up camp that morning. Didn't even discuss it. Just packed and left. Rick still has those photos. He's shown them to wildlife experts, cryptozoologists, skeptics. No one can agree on what it is. Some say it's a bear standing upright. Others say the photos are too clear for that the proportions are wrong, that whatever it is, it's something we don't have a name for. Rick doesn't care what people believe. He knows what he saw, and he knows he'll never go back to those woods. The Pacific Northwest is vast, endless. There are places here where no human has ever set foot. Forests so deep that sunlight never reaches the ground. Mountains that have stood for millennia, watching as civilizations rise and fall. We like to think we've mapped it all, understood it all. But the truth is, we've barely scratched the surface. And in those unmapped places, in those forgotten corners, things still live. Things that were here long before us. Things that will be here long after we're gone. These 7 stories are just a fraction of what's out there. Reports come in every year. Hikers who see things they can't explain, campers who hear voices in the night, fishermen who vanish without a trace. Most of the time, these stories are dismissed, written off as imagination or misidentification. But the people who experience them know better. They carry those memories for the rest of their lives. They look over their shoulders in the dark. They lock their doors twice. They avoid certain roads, certain trails, certain stretches of coastline. Because once you've seen it, once you've felt it, you can never unsee it. You can never go back to believing the world is safe and understood. If these stories made your heart race, hit that like button and subscribe. Because here at Chills from Reality, we don't just tell stories. We pull back the curtain on the world we thought we knew. And what's waiting on the other side is darker than you ever imagined. The fear doesn't end when the story does. It follows you home. It waits in the silence. And maybe, just maybe, it's listening right now. Stay safe out there. And remember, if you're ever alone in the woods, and you hear something calling your name, don't answer. Because whatever it is, it already knows you're there.